It's pointless to be wise, said Solomon. You know what? It is if all you're going to do is be selfish about it. When Solomon was earning this phenomenal amount of money, and he had, by his own admission, made love to over 1,000 women, he says there is absolutely no point to life. A lot of people turn to their work to find significance, and I get that. For some men whose home life is not great, they find a great sense of significance in being able to go to work and have people respect them. Would you like to be famous? If you do, you're not alone. It appears that there are millions of people around the world who crave fame. Many of the YouTube clips that get the most views are done by people trying to have their 15 minutes of fame in the spotlight. This is the story of a man who had an income in today's terms of around about $1.2 million a week. And he says in this account of his life, which is his account of having immense wealth, immense power, as we'll see in a moment, and yet he found that his life was empty. And this is his story of how none of these things fulfilled him. None of these things satisfied him. None of these things gave him a sense that my life counts, my life is worth it. I understand the equation. I understand what life is all about. And we call that a sense of significance. You can look at your life and say, I'm making a positive, valuable contribution. I'm going to leave a legacy. I'm going to leave something behind. My life will have been worth it. And so it's really important to understand that when we're reading certain passages in the Bible, we're actually reading sometimes from someone's perspective. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says things like this. It talks about the sunrise and the sunset. The sun goes up and the sun goes down. Here's the question. Does the sun go up and does the sun go down? No, it doesn't. But from someone's perspective, which the Bible accurately records, it looks like that. Does this make sense? When Solomon was earning this phenomenal amount of money, and he had, by his own admission, made love to over 1,000 women, he says there is absolutely no point to life. And he says it in verse 2 of chapter 1. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. In other words, there is just no point to this. I have tried to find a point to life. I have earned phenomenal money. I have made love to an inexhaustible number of women, and I find no satisfaction in any of it. And he goes on and talks in Ecclesiastes of all the things that he did and could find no joy in it. So, when you understand that most of Ecclesiastes, apart from the last few verses, is from the perspective of a man whose perspective on reality is greatly distorted, we need to understand that. So this is the search for significance. And we're going to look at one of the aspects of Solomon, and that is fame. Who wants to be famous? Well, the answer to that question is a whole lot of people, apparently. A whole lot of people. Who is the most famous person in the world today? There's even magazines set up so that people like us, mere mortals, can examine the lives of the famous. According to Forbes magazine, Beyoncé Knowles is the most famous celebrity in the world today. She was the number one celebrity when it came to earnings. She earned a staggering $115 million in the year 2014. She is, of course, an actress and an entrepreneur and musician. She's been viewed by literally millions upon millions of people.
She's considered to be the number 1 celebrity in the top 100 celebrities of the world. She was the number 2 money earner for the year 2014. When it came to being in the press, she was the 4th most reported about person in the world for 2014. She's the 17th most powerful woman in the world.
Apparently there's enough people who are interested in famous people for the whole industry of what's called the paparazzi to exist. Now, that's Beyonce Knowles.
According to Sam Eastland, who wrote Eye of the Red Tsar, he said this: "They will do anything to have it. They will betray anyone. They will humiliate themselves and those around them. To be hated or loved makes no difference to them. What they want is to be known. It is a sad addiction, and such people wallow in it all their lives, like pigs in filth." He goes on to say that in today's world, fame is not merely seen as a byproduct or a consequence of achieving something. Fame is pursued directly as a goal in and of itself, with there being numerous examples of people who place fame as the ultimate achievement in life and above anything else. It might seem that fame is what one is on the planet to attain. In the past, one typically became famous through what they'd given to the world, and although this might have not always been something that benefited humanity, it was usually something significant.
In other words, some people think that if they can be famous, they will become significant. Their life will have meaning. So this guy's saying that there are some people and their pursuit of fame has crossed a line. It's actually really, really, really unhealthy. Now, if I was to ask you, what is the most watched video clip on YouTube? Before you answer, let me give you the answer. When I mentioned it, that I was going to show it to Josh, Josh suddenly broke out because he knows every Justin Bieber song. He just immediately broke out into the song, "Baby, baby, 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 baby." Ooh. Which was the most watched YouTube clip up until a little while ago. 1.2 billion people have watched that clip. Do you realise that's a 1/6 of the world's population? 1 in 6 have watched Josh G's idol do this song. But now he's been pipped. Poor Justin.
On YouTube, the most viewed clip of any of the millions of clips available is by a Korean singer named Psy. It's called Gangnam Style.
오빤 Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. 낮에는 따사로운 인간적인 여자. 커피 한
Josh
잔에
apparently knows this one as well and is
여유 있는
prepared to
여자.
do a private rendition after. Anyway, 2.2 billion people on planet Earth have gone to YouTube. 2.2 and 1 have gone, and in fact, I watched that clip for the first time yesterday. I had heard about the phenomenon, but I'd never seen it. I don't know why. It's like I only had books to read and things to do, so I don't know what's wrong with me. But anyway, this brings me, when we're talking about something famous, to something that's so famous you probably carry it around with you most of the time. It's an Australian 20-cent piece. The Australian 20-cent piece. And the reason I bring this up is because, according to most sources, the most famous person in the world today is Queen Elizabeth II. Recognised in more countries around the world than Beyonce Knowles, shock horror, Justin Bieber, or that fella there whose name is Psy, Psy. Got no idea who that guy was, apart from the fact that he's Korean. And the song is mostly in Korean with a little bit in English, and apparently just got I don't know, it's like, anyway. Now, I actually went on Wikipedia because someone's written an article on the phenomenon of YouTube videos, and I thought, well, I don't want to go through all the YouTube videos there are, and I'll let someone else do it. So they did, and the first 100 of the most popular of YouTube videos are all music clips. All music clips. You actually have to go a long way down the list to find a non-music clip YouTube phenomenon that's made someone famous. And you come to a couple where it's usually someone's finger, they've got a famous finger, tickling a kitten. And the kitten goes, "Mwah, mwah." And hundreds of millions of people have watched this mindless this video on a kitten being tickled. Then you go another long way down the list and you come to two little baby boys where one of them says, I don't know what he says, but anyway, it's two cute little baby boys. And this is what is capturing the attention of the world today. I want to highlight this with what it used to take to be famous. So let's play a little game, shall we?
Who am I? This man had a deep faith in Jesus of Nazareth. He believed the Bible was the divinely inspired Word of God. He invented calculus and the reflecting telescope. He coined the word gravity. He mathematically proved the Roman Catholic Church to be incorrect regarding their geocentrism and proved beyond all doubt the facts of heliocentrism. He explained why and how every large body in the universe moves as it does, and established principles upon which 95% of all mechanical engineering done today is based. This man is Sir Isaac Newton. According to Google, over 1 million people search for information on Sir Isaac Newton each month. There have been 400,000 biographies that have been published about this man, who is considered to be the 10th most famous person to have ever lived.
He lived from 1642 to 1727. All right, so this just sets it up for fame, because now when we come to Ecclesiastes, we are looking at someone that the Bible describes as famous. My recollection, my understanding of Scripture is that there are 3 people who are attributed in the Bible as having fame, and Solomon is one of them. His father David was another, and we'll see the other one in just a moment. So in Ecclesiastes 1:16, Solomon says this: I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. He's saying, I'm the greatest person who's ever lived. No one has ever surpassed me for ability or wisdom. So you can see, humility was not one of his major traits. This man was very, very sure of himself. Now, he didn't start out like this, by the way. And in fact, the reason he became like this is because God endowed him with great wisdom and great wealth, because he was initially humble. Now, there's a whole other thing there about how to handle fame, and I wish for some of you here fame, but I don't wish it for you all, because for most of you it would be your ruin. It would destroy you. Now, when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to Jerusalem to test him with hard questions, having a very great retinue, that is, servants and guards and soldiers and people to wait on her, and camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. I really just wanted to point out to you that she had heard of his fame, and she was in the middle of Africa, and she's heard about this man. Jesus says that there were 2 very important visitors that came to Solomon. Jesus just mentions it. It wasn't the main point of what he was saying, but he said Solomon and all his fame, who had the Queen of Sheba and the Queen of the South. So there's at least a couple of queens who came because of Solomon's fame. So he was a very famous man. So he says in chapter 2, verse 9, so now we're in the second chapter, where again he repeats this statement, no one is better than me at anything. Let me put it the way he put it. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. So here's a man who became famous for several reasons. And here are some of those reasons. The first one we've read already, his wisdom. He became incredibly wise. But here's the thing. He didn't find that he was able to use his wisdom for anything significant. Now, here's one of the things that I want to help you to come to understand. A life of significance is a life where you help other people. If all you are doing is living this life for the marrow you can squeeze out of the bone, the juice you can squeeze out of the fruit, you are not living a significant life. You are living a self-centered, selfish life, the direct opposite of significance. So Solomon did not find significance in wisdom. He should have. He should have, but he didn't. God has given you gifts too. God gave Solomon the gift of wisdom. God has given you gifts. Are you using those gifts that God has given you significantly? Are you using those things that God has given you to bless others? God has given you technology, resources, a degree of wealth. Are you using it to bless someone else? The greatest man of his day who had ever lived didn't. He had great wealth, great wisdom, and he didn't use it to bless others. He says, then I said in my heart, Ecclesiastes 2:15, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart, this is vanity, or another word for vanity, pointless. It's pointless to be wise, said Solomon. You know what? It is if all you're going to do is be selfish about it. If all you're going to do is figure out what you can get out of it through your gift of wisdom, yeah, life is vanity. It is pointless. Ecclesiastes 6:8 says this, for what advantage has the wise man over the fool? What does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? So he says this several times. I see no advantage in being wise. So this is written toward the end of his life. In fact, this is probably, I'm guessing, months before he died, maybe even weeks before he died. And he's writing this, looking back at it, looking back over his life, over the 40 or so years that he was king. And he's going, 10 or so years into me being king, I just thought, what is the point? And this is where he's at. So he's telling his story that he really did not see a point. Solomon also became famous for his phenomenal wealth. Unbelievable wealth. It says in the 2 Chronicles 9:22, thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. But you know what? With all that money, think about it. What could you do with $1 million? Well, imagine you had it coming in every week for 40 years. What good could you do with it? I think the answer is a lot. Or the answer might be great. You could do great good with that kind of wealth. What did he do with it? He threw banquets. He enlarged his palace. He bought slaves. He planted vineyards so he could have more wine to get more drunk on. That's what he did with his great wealth. So what would you do with a significant amount of money? I'll tell you what the answer is. You would do exactly the same as you're doing with the money you've got now. Don't wait. So Solomon didn't find significance in his wealth. He says in chapter 6 and verse 2, a man to whom God gives wealth, possessions and honour so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It's also a grievous evil. So you get all this money and you don't get to exploit all the pleasure you can get out of it. you die, what's the point of being wealthy? That's what he's saying. You can see how this man has a very distorted perspective on reality. Solomon also became famous for his works, what he did. He built huge buildings. He planted entire forests. He planted huge vineyards. He built roads. He built ships. He did some phenomenal things. He says this in chapter 2, verse 4, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. And he lists all the other things that he did. Great works. A lot of people turn to their work to find significance, and I get that. For some men whose home life is not great, they find a great sense of significance in being able to go to work and have people respect them. I get that. I've spoken with men who have been in a home life where they have not felt respected by their wife. So they will spend more time at work than they need to because at least there they're getting some respect. I understand men who think like that, but can I tell you at the end of the day, it's empty. It's utterly empty. And King Solomon says so. He says that in all his work, he realised, I do all these things, and then one day I'm going to die and someone else will get them, and they didn't do anything to earn them. This is stupid, all that I've done. It's vanity. So he was unfulfilled in his wisdom, in his wealth, and in his work. Completely unfulfilled. I want to contrast him with, I could have gone through the list and told you the 10 most famous people. The 10 most famous people, the number 9 is Leonardo da Vinci, an amazing man. Number 8 is William Shakespeare. To be or... Thank you, a little bit slow. But it means you've heard it. It's little expressions that have come into the English language. As dead as a door nail. These are all things that Shakespeare invented. No one had ever heard it before he said it. He invented them. So he's very famous. Number 7, the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul, 7th most famous person that's ever lived. And then you go through the list and you've got number 6 is Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. Number 5, I think is Moses. Then you've got Abraham. Then you come down to number 2 and it's Muhammad, although Google says they can't verify that because apparently you're not allowed to depict him, and as the French have found out, and you're not allowed to write a book with his name on the cover, so they don't know how many books have been written about him. But here's the 2 criteria they use to figure out who is the most famous person. How many Google searches a month? And this person receives 24 million searches a month. And the number of books written about them numbers in the hundreds of millions of books have been written about them. And in fact, easily more books have been written about this person than any other person ever.
He never recorded a song or invented a dance move or, to our knowledge, tickled a kitten, yet he achieved fame that has not been paralleled.
So Jesus' fame, it says in Matthew 4:24, spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those who were afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. So the fame of Jesus, this is Matthew chapter 4, not Matthew chapter 24. In other words, this is very early on in his ministry. Jesus became famous. Now here is, if we were to look at the way Jesus handled fame compared to how Solomon handled fame, with Jesus' fame, it was not the gain, it was not the goal for him. He was not craving people's attention. I see too many people today craving attention. It's unhealthy. In fact, Jesus, when he got what he considered to be too much attention, you only have to read through the Gospel of Luke to read things like this. Jesus withdrew from the crowd, as was his habit. It says, at night, Jesus went for a walk to pray all night by himself, as he often did. When the crowds became too vast, Jesus got in a boat and said to his disciples, let's get out of here. Let's go to the other side. Jesus was not craving fame, but the gifts that the Father had given him, he used, and that verse is a great verse to highlight it. He used what God had given him and the fame to bless others. What has God given you that you can use to bless others? There are some here, and you should write a thoughtful blog every day. You should. There are some people here, and you should write a book. There are some people here today, and you need to see the world differently. You need to go and talk to David Stallard and buy a camera. I'm serious. I'm kind of serious. You need to. Some people, their whole world vision is their navel. They're so busy looking at themselves and their own little problems. I'll tell you, one of the things that has helped me having a camera is you begin to see what you normally miss. Some people need to think, how can I bless someone else? That's what Jesus was doing. Jesus' significance did not come from him being famous. He didn't say to his disciples, you guys go into the dinner party and just I'll make an entrance. He didn't do that. He didn't do it. In fact, he did everything the book says not to do. And yet, he is today the most famous person who has ever lived. If you think significance in life, finding out what life is all about, comes from you becoming famous, history tells us you're wrong. You're very wrong. And here's what the most famous person who's ever lived said about life and its point. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits? You've never surrendered to Jesus Christ. You've never given your life to Christ. Can I invite you to do that now? It starts with a prayer. It starts with a prayer that something like this: Jesus, please forgive me. I've done wrong. Cleanse me, wash me, give me a brand new start. Fill me with your Holy Spirit and help me to start again. I want to be a Christian. I want to follow you. Help me to do your will, I pray. Amen.